I behaved badly a couple years ago. I was living in New York, and like a New Yorker, I was out on a Saturday night, and like an old lady, when 10:30 rolled around, I was like, oh, it's past my bedtime, I gotta go home. So I made my way back to the subway alone, because who else leaves a party at 10:30 at night on a Saturday? And I got to the 2nd Avenue F train, which, if you don't know New York, it's not a sketchy area. It's totally happening at night. You shouldn't expect to get robbed, but I did. And I was heading down into the subway, and I noticed this guy noticed me. And my first reaction, like my New York mindset, was like, fuck you, stranger. Take a picture, it lasts longer. And I walked into the subway, you know, like you do. And I got down there, and it was totally empty. And the logical, reasonable me was like, hey, I should probably leave. You know, wait for a crowd of people to come down or something. But the old lady in me was like, but I really want to go home and go to sleep. So I was like, I'll just swipe my card real fast and go down on the platform where I'm sure there are tons of people. So I ran over to the turnstile and I swiped my card, and it had, of course, expired. So I was like, okay, I should probably leave this abandoned subway. But I really wanted to get home in a timely manner, so I was like, I'll just buy a new card real quick. Like, under normal circumstances, I would have dilly-dallied. So like, I ran up to the little kiosk thing, and I made the executive decision at that point that I was going to buy a single ride ticket instead of an unlimited. Because, gosh, wouldn't it suck to lose an $86 Metro card were I to be robbed? Now, I feel like if you have that insight in that moment, you should listen to those feelings. They probably tell you something. So I'm standing there with $2 in one hand and my wallet in the other, and that guy that I noticed me, came down into the subway. I was like, oh, what now? And I clutched my belongings close to me like you do, because they're so important. And he came over and he got my attention. He said something like, oh, is that machine working? And then he lunged at my wallet. And he grabbed my wallet with one hand and then put something on the back of my neck. Now, here is where I think he went wrong, because I feel like if we could go back in time and I could like give him notes, I'd be like, you should have shown me the gun, because then I might have behaved differently. But in that moment, I had this man invading my personal space, and he wasn't very large, by the way. He's kind of like my height and petite, you know, like kind of petite. Like, we probably wouldn't date, not because I'd have a problem with it, because he probably wouldn't ask me out, because he'd have a problem with, you know, size difference, that kind of thing. So here I am with this man grabbing onto my wallet with one hand, and something's on the back of my neck, and the only thought in my head, like the only thought, is this passage from a Mary Higgins Clark novel. Now, if you've never read Mary Higgins Clark, kudos to you. They are terrible, but I read a lot of them. They're mystery thrillers, and in this one particular passage that was the only thing on my mind, there was a part where the main character, hero woman, is tricked by the bad guy because he puts a highlighter on the back of her head and he tells her it's a gun. So I'm here, this small man in my space, and I am 100% convinced that there is a highlighter, a yellow highlighter on the back of my neck. So I did what I think anyone would do if that's what they thought was happening, and I gave him a nice hearty hip check. Like, I pushed him, because I played field hockey in high school, by the way, no big deal. So he went flying and was very surprised. And I should have been, but instead I was like, oh, that's not a highlighter, that's a handgun, except, I have to say, at this point in time, I was kind of an expert on handguns, because I had just finished watching the first 3 seasons of The Wire back-to-back on TV. So I knew what a handgun looked like, and that, my friends, was like an 1870s revolver. That was like he had raided his grandmother's armoire. That's what that looked like. And while I was like standing there kind of mocking his gun in my head, he came back and lunged at the wallet again. But he didn't threaten me with his gun. He just sort of held it limply by his side and only had one hand on my wallet, and I had 2. So I didn't let go. So we had this tug of war over my wallet that went on for a really long time. Like, in retrospect, I can't believe no one came down into the subway. Like, and so we're having this tug of war long enough that I was like, oh, hey, the only sound is the sound of our shoes shuffling in the subway. I was like, I should make some noise. It's like, I should scream. That's what people do. But I wasn't feeling it. Like, it felt really awkward, like, and false. I was like, oh my God, I can't scream. That's so embarrassing. I was like, all right, I'll call for help. That's a thing people do. And like the same thing. I was like, it just doesn't feel like it's coming from me. It doesn't feel truthful. So like, as we're having this tug of war, man with a gun with his like, and Lindley by my side, I was like, what should I do to make some noise? So I settled on saying no, because I was babysitting a lot at the time, and I was very familiar with being no to the kids. So like, we're tug of warring over this wall, and I turn to him and I go, no. Like I'm yelling at a dog who's peed on the carpet. Bad dog, no. And it felt so good. I was like, that's the right one. There's the ticket. So I kept saying it louder and louder. No, no, no. Until like echoed around the subway, and I was sitting there like, that sounded good. That was nice. Until he pushed away from me. And he goes, you crazy bitch. And I stopped. And it was like all reason came back into my head. And I was like, oh my God. He's right, I am a crazy bitch. At what point did that man become the voice of reason in this situation? And then he looks at me and goes, can I at least have $2 for the subway ride? And there it was, still clenched in my greedy little fist, those $2 I was going to use. And I was like, well, maybe. And I like weighed the pros and cons. I was like, I could give him $2, but he did just physically assault me. And as I was standing there, like literally thinking about it, giving it thought, he took off and he ran away. And I was like, all right. And he left me pretty much right where I had started, like in front of that kiosk. And I was like, I could just continue this transaction. But I decided that it had been a traumatic event. So I was like, no, I'm going to take a cab home. And the worst part of this entire ordeal was that I had to go to an ATM to get cash so I could take a cab home, because there was only $6 in that wallet. Yeah, I did that. Thank you very much.